Netflix's Avatar, The Last Airbender just came out, and since I have recently watched the original, not this godforsaken abomination, but the real thing, the OG series, I have a fresh memory of the magic that captured many, and sort of a starting point to judge the new series by Netflix. I think it's pretty much impossible to talk about it without drawing comparisons to the 2005 animated series, so I am planning to make more detailed videos about it in the future, but for now on, I just wanted to talk about the first impressions without getting into any spoilers. Did Netflix manage to recreate what was so amazing about the original? Well, yes and no. I'll explain. First thing we get introduced to is the Fire Nation, and we get to see the city and a bit of bending on their part. The city looks gorgeous, and as we move swiftly through the different locations, we see it's the recurring theme. The locations are recreated very well and are really stunning. You can tell that a lot of work went into every detail, and it really shows. I felt immersed right away. We see familiar animals and buildings, and the color schemes were applied in a way that really make you distinguish between different locations, something that not all fantasy shows manage to pull. The costumes are also very good, although some of them felt a bit too squeaky clean to me, but that might be just the pettiness in me speaking. Overall, the character designs are in most part pretty much aligned with the original ones, and they really did a good job with the outfits. Now about bending. I can honestly say I was pleasantly surprised with the way it was portrayed in the series, especially in comparison to a certain movie. It feels dynamic and is visually rewarding. The fights are choreographed very well, and I love the way elements interact with one another, like air fueling the flames on firebenders. I think it came out very well. Waterbending is a bit underwhelming for now, but it might be due to the current skill set of a certain waterbender who wields it, but let's just leave it at that so we don't get into any spoilers. The action sequences are really fun to watch. The fighting styles have been preserved, each fight is different, and they really managed to keep them interesting. There is a big change in tone comparing to the original, and it reflects in the fights. These are quite brutal, so prepare yourself to see people set on fire and burned alive. Just saying, it's not as PG as the original, which I think raises the stakes for the viewer. Where in the series the atrocities committed by the Fire Nation are mostly implied, here we see them in full force. Since I imagine a lot of people who watch the new Avatar are familiar with the original and might have watched it as kids, that tonal change makes perfect sense as these people will now be adults. It does come with some problems though. The creators of the show have openly stated before that they wanted to appeal to the Game of Thrones fans and make the series a bit heavier, but they haven't fully committed to it, and it appears that they still wanted to somewhat preserve the tone of the original and attempted to strike a balance between the two. The result can at times give you a tonal whiplash. In one moment you see people screaming while being burned alive, and in the next moment you get a lemur joke and some goofiness going on. You could argue that the original also contained some heavy stuff, but it was really toned down, so it fitted the overall theme of the series a bit better. I also can't help but feel the original toned down the heavy themes to appeal to children more, while the new one toned down the silly bits to appeal to adults, but it just doesn't work as well. The characters feel way more serious and I'd say way less endearing, but we're gonna get to it later. The music was really beautiful. They incorporated a lot of themes from the original soundtracks, which I think was a great stylistic choice, and it added to the nostalgia. I enjoyed it a lot, but I would make a completely subjective argument that at times it felt a bit out of place. There are certain scenes where I felt the music didn't match what was going on screen. I especially remember one particular scene in the first episode where I kept thinking to myself, what's with the music? But for the most part, it was complementary to the story, and the composer really managed to pull his weight. The camera work was done in a very creative way, and there was some great shots thrown in there. In general, the visuals were a feast for the eyes, which for some may be enough reason to watch the series. What about the plot, you may ask? What about the characters? Well, this is where some of my major criticism boards our little Avatar train, and again, I will try my best to avoid spoilers. Some of the changes that were made were at best questionable, and at worst just plain stupid. The plot revolves around the first book, and in order to showcase the full story, they had to do some bending and redact or transform certain elements. However, one may ask, what is the point of adding certain scenes that weren't even in the original and are hardly adding anything to the story? It feels like the creators wanted to fix something that ain't broken. so they can create something of their own. But since they were piggybacking of the series that had such a huge fan base, that move was always gonna backfire. And as much as I understand the need to compress the story a bit, some changes that were introduced did feel more like a deviation from the original rather than an attempt to be truthful to it within the time frame given. This, of course, had a major impact on some of the story arcs, and it was not a good thing, because it really flattened them, and as a result, they didn't have such a huge emotional impact anymore. At times, those changes didn't even make any sense to me and frankly made me raise my eyebrows. The characters are somewhat similar to the original counterparts, but they seem to be lacking the quirks and the crucial elements of their personalities that get challenged within their story arcs. In the original, the characters are amazingly fleshed out, and there are certain aspects of them that need to be addressed or in some cases overcome in order to get a proper character development. These elements that made the original characters so relatable appear to be missing, which makes their new counterparts way more shallow and surface level. Part of why the Avatar was so amazing was how the original creators managed to bring to life these psychologically complex characters and made us experience their turmoil so we get to understand their motivation, even if we don't always agree with them. New Avatar really lacks in that department. I just don't see an hour-long video essays being made about the psychology of Zuko or Katara based on their presence in the show. They just lack depth, and it's a shame because that's one of the reasons why the original was so successful. When it comes to depth, it also really affects the relationship between the characters. They lack any chemistry. We don't see them developing any meaningful relationships. Even in the lighter scenes played for gags, that lack of connection really shines through. A joke is made, they laugh, but it feels incredibly awkward and staged. We don't feel it and we don't believe it. The characters feel more like plot devices to push the story forward rather than actual people. The biggest offenders are unfortunately our main trio. I never knew the animated 2D characters may feel more human than, well, actual human beings. I also feel the dynamic between the characters were seriously skewed and meddled with, and those changes were not for the better. I will probably get into detail about it when I make my review with spoilers attached, so if you're interested in this, please watch my next video. But for now on, without giving away the plot, I can say that those changes in relationship dynamics and overall depth of the characters made some of them less interesting and some of them really annoying. And what is not helping the situations are dialogues. Oh my. While again, I really understand that the story needed to be compressed a bit, this doesn't justify the sheer stupidity of some of the lines forcefully inserted into the story. Forget the rule of show don't tell. It's on fire and screaming like the victims of the Fire Nation. Expect the characters to go off on these long tangents about their personalities and motivations so you can switch off your brain and like a dribbling brain-dead fool just focus on the visuals, which again are great. It feels a bit like that play in the recap episode in Book 3. Spoiler alert, probably shouldn't say much more about the play, those who know. The characters start these incredibly pompous monologues where they give away all the exposition and tell you everything you need to know about everything. A blind person could probably watch it, listen to these and make up the whole story based on these alone. They feel really forced and completely unnecessary, and there's a lot of them. Apart from monologues, the exchanges between characters are also full of juxtaposition, and it's done in a way that is completely opposite to subtle, which makes those lines really unrealistic. I kept thinking to myself like, nobody would ever talk like that to anyone ever. And after a while of being hammered with these, they become really annoying and take you out of the experience. You really don't need Aang to explain to you that he's sad. You can just show it. Honestly, it's been a while. It's been a while since I saw such a terrible dialogues put in action, and it's a shame since it's the complete opposite to what the original show was doing. I've actually rewatched episode 1 of the animated series, and I was astonished by how the casual lines of dialogue that were not even connected to the main plot whatsoever kept offering some real insights into psychology of the characters and foreshadowed events to come. This brilliant writing is unfortunately nowhere to be seen in the new Avatar series. Overall, the show is not bad, but it's a far cry from the legendary series of Avatar: The Last Airbender, and I'm beginning to understand what might have been those creative differences stated by the creators upon leaving the Netflix project. If you haven't watched the original animated series, you might enjoy the Netflix adaptation, but be prepared for some level of stupidity in the plot and the dialogues. If you found yourself captivated by the lore and are open to animation as a medium, I really recommend you give the original series a go. I mean, it's holding a test of time, it's amazing, it's wonderful. I mean, 10 out of 10, it's just my fave. And if you have already seen it, you might want to give the new series a watch for the nostalgia and amazing visuals, but it's still probably better to just revisit the original or watch both for fun of comparing the two. This is what I'm planning to do, and if you're interested in seeing something like that, please stay tuned. It is really hard to judge Netflix's Avatar The Last Airbender as a standalone piece since the original series was so huge. But if I had to do it, I would say it's okay. It's entertaining, visually pleasing, and if you can get over some issues with the story pacing and wooden dialogue, you will probably enjoy it. But if your hopes were high, just like mine, you might end up feeling a little bit disappointed. It happens a lot when the source material is so great that the new reincarnations just don't live up to the same standard. But one thing I can say for sure is definitely better than a movie. Thank you for watching my review, and if you liked it, please give it a like and subscribe for more content like this. Come on, stick around. It will be fantastic.